In the news tonight, His Majesty holds talks in Manama with the King of Bahrain on bilateral ties and the latest in the region, ahead of taking part in the first international conference of donors for Syria, which convenes in Kuwait tomorrow. The Prime Minister submits the resignation of his government, but is asked by His Majesty to carry on with constitutional duties in a caretaker capacity pending the formation of a new government. And at least 65 people are found dead with shots in their heads in a district in the Syrian city of Aleppo, as fighting between rebels and government forces continues in different parts of the country. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King held talks in Manama with Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa on bilateral ties and latest developments in the region, namely the escalating situation in Syria. King Hamad congratulated His Majesty on a successful parliamentary election, which he said constitutes a landmark in Jordan's reform process. During an expanded discussion attended by officials from both sides, the two leaders stressed the need for a comprehensive solution to the deteriorating situation, especially with relation to the influx of people fleeing the violence. His Majesty and King Hamad discussed the recent Arab Socio-Economic Summit in Riyadh, agreeing on the need to capitalize on the outcome of the summit to further enhance Arab cooperation and integration. The talks also dealt with the first international conference of donors for Syria to convene in Kuwait tomorrow in support of the Syrian people. King Abdullah will travel to Kuwait tomorrow to take part in the conference, expected to raise funds for millions of internally displaced Syrian refugees living in neighboring countries. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal ibn al-Hussein was sworn in as regent during His Majesty's stay abroad. His Majesty the King congratulated Jordanians on the success of last week's parliamentary elections, describing the day as a shining milestone in Jordan's political history and democratic process. In a letter to all Jordanians, the King said the people made history when they threw their confidence in the elections and participated in the polls, coming closer to a new phase in the process of change, reform, political pluralism, and public participation. His Majesty said House representatives now have huge responsibilities ahead of them. They are expected to reach out to all citizens as well as political forces and local community figures to engage them in debate and to ensure that their voices are heard so as to move on to the next reform milestones with the highest degree of consensus. King Abdullah commended the Independent Elections Commission for conducting a poll that won the praise of local and international monitors. He also voiced appreciation of the volunteers who worked day and night, sacrificing their break time, which he said has impressed both citizens and monitors, and thanked civil society organizations for their contribution to public awareness. His Majesty also thanks state agencies for offering their full support to the election process and to public security, gendarmerie, and civil defense personnel for making the day a bright landmark in Jordan's democracy. The King congratulated all those who won the confidence of the electorate and underlined the huge responsibilities that await them. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour submitted the resignation of his government to His Majesty the King. His Majesty, however, asked the government to carry on with its constitutional mandate in a caretaker capacity pending the formation of a new government. A new cabinet will be formed after the newly elected parliament convenes in an extraordinary session to engage in parliamentary consultations on a new government. Chairman of the Jordan Atomic Energy Commission, Khal briefed the Prime Minister during a visit to the Commission's headquarters today on Jordan's nuclear energy program and feasibility studies underway to launch an atomic reactor. Tuqan said the site studies have been completed and site selection was made based on environmental and community considerations. As for the tender to build the reactor, Tuqan said there are two offers, one from a French-Japanese consortium and another from a Russian enterprise. He noted that the two offers are being evaluated and a decision will be taken by the end of March, adding that all issues pertaining to the nuclear reactor will be taken in consultation with Parliament. During the visit, Mansour also inspected a uranium laboratory which he was also briefed on the analytical measurements of the mineral. Also today, the Jordan Atomic Energy Commission held a seminar entitled Peaceful Uses of Nuclear Energy and Nuclear Security and Non-Proliferation. Representatives from the Japanese Atomic Energy Commission and Jordan Nuclear Regulatory Commission were in attendance to share best practices in peaceful use of nuclear energy, namely electricity generation.
Medical facilities where nuclear has been achieved so far. Of this vital and strategic the milestones of the International Convention for the Suppression and the United Nations Security Council named. As we know, Japan is a very developed country which had a wide experience in using nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, and this seminar aims at exchanging experiences and also get the best of the lessons learned from the Fukushima Daiichi incident. In addition to that, discussions will also focus on establishing nuclear security regimes on a national level as part of the global nuclear security regime.
Over to Syria, where at least 65 people were found dead in a district of the northern Syrian city of Aleppo. A video posted on the internet showed the bodies with gunshot wounds to the heads and their hands bound, alongside what is thought to be the Qwayq River in the rebel-held Bustan al-Qasr neighborhood of Aleppo. The Qwayq River rises in Turkey and travels through districts of Aleppo before it reaches Bustan al-Qasr. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said more bodies could be found, raising the number of deaths, and it was not clear who had carried out the killings. On the ground, meanwhile, rebels, including Al-Qaeda-linked fighters, captured a security agency in the eastern city of Deir ez-Zor after days of heavy fighting. A video posted online showed men armed with assault rifles cheering as they stood outside a building they said was the local intelligence agency branch. Elsewhere in Daraa, the rebels carried out a controlled explosion to collapse a building claimed to have been a checkpoint for government forces. Fighting also took place in the northern town of Ras Al Ain on the border with Turkey between rebels and Kurdish militants. As donor countries prepare to meet in Kuwait to pledge aid for Syria, U.S. President Barack Obama said Washington will boost humanitarian aid to Syrians. He urged other nations to do more to help the United Nations, which is struggling to assist some 4 million people in the war-torn country. Obama said he authorized an additional $155 million in aid for food, medical care, and clothing for Syrians and refugees. He said American aid means winter supplies for more than 500,000 people in Aleppo, Hims, and Deir ez-Zor. Obama issued a video statement with Arabic subtitles, speaking directly to Syrians. In the video message, Obama said he has wrestled with whether a U.S. military intervention in Syria would help resolve the conflict or make things worse. Those interested can watch the video message on link.reuters.com/facts55T.
Even as we work to end the violence against you, this aid will help address.
Meanwhile, a new record number of Syrian refugees have entered the kingdom in 24 hours. 2,628 Syrians are reported to have crossed into Jordan over the past day and overnight. An armed forces source said border guards received the displaced before they were transferred to an allocated area where they were provided with urgently needed assistance. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said Israel's parliamentary elections will open new avenues for Middle East peace and pledged that the United States will pursue potential opportunities. Clinton told an assembly in Washington that U.S. President Barack Obama and her soon-to-be successor, John Kerry, will look for every possible opening for peace in the Middle East. John Kerry today won the unanimous support of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to replace Clinton as Obama's new Secretary of State.
Concerns and the concerns of the entire region about what the
Facebook question that we received, Secretary.
Israel set a new precedent today when it boycotted a United Nations Human Rights Forum that was due to review its record and criticize its practices in the occupied Palestinian territories. Poland's ambassador, the current president of the Human Rights Council, noted the absence of the Israeli delegation and ordered the meeting suspended briefly to decide how to proceed. Israel suspended relations with the Council last May because of what it called an inherent bias against it. And over to Egypt, where the army chief is saying that political strife is pushing the state to the brink of collapse. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said in a statement that the continuation of the struggle of the different political forces over the management of state affairs and the economic, political and social challenges facing the country represent a real threat to the security of Egypt. His comments are seen to highlight the mounting sense of crisis facing Egypt and the difficulties facing President Mohamed Morsi, especially after days of mounting riots and unrest. However, today violence is reported to have largely subsided across Egypt, although there were still some cases of youth hurling rocks at police lines in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Police again fired tear gas at the youths in a street near Tahrir Square, but the clashes were less intense than previous days and traffic was able to cross the area. In Port Said, meanwhile, thousands were again on the streets of the city to mourn the deaths of 2 people in the latest clashes there, taking the total toll to 52 people. And back here at home, Her Majesty Queen Rania chaired the Jordan River Foundation JRF Board of Trustees annual meeting, which reviewed future plans and programs to be implemented across the kingdom this year. Her Majesty discussed ways of strengthening programs to better serve local communities and improve people's living conditions by empowering them and giving them the lead in the development process. JRF's strategy for the upcoming year includes more youth-oriented programs aimed at enhancing their economic and social opportunities. JRF will also focus on the environmental and on energy-saving projects in cooperation with the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. JRF projects have affected more than 1 million lives, and through its 5-year strategy, the foundation aims to expand its outreach to the widest possible corners in the kingdom. Barcelona and Real Madrid meet tomorrow in the Copa del Rey semi-final first leg in a match that is expected to be intense, complicated and difficult. Real have had the edge over Barca in direct meetings this term as they beat them on the away goals rule in the season-opening Spanish Super Cup after drawing 4-4 and also grabbed a 2-2 draw in La Liga at Camp Nou. But Barca beat Real 4-3 on aggregate to knock them out of the cup in the quarterfinals last year. Barcelona's assistant coach, Jordi Rura, will be taking charge of the team, while coach Tito Villanova undergoes medical treatment. Speaking ahead of tomorrow's Copa del Rey clash with rivals Barcelona, Real Madrid striker Karim Benzema dismissed suggestions that the team have fallen out with coach Jose Mourinho. He also brushed aside rumors that club captain Iker Casillas and defender Sergio Ramos had threatened to leave the club if Mourinho stayed at the club beyond next summer. With Casillas out with a fractured finger, Benzema said he did not know whether reserve goalkeeper Antonio Adan or new signing from Sevilla Diego Lopez would play against Barcelona. And finally, for a quick look at the weather, cold and partly cloudy conditions continue tonight with light rain in the northern and central regions. Tomorrow, similar conditions prevail with a continued chance for rain in the morning hours, and in the evening, a cold front will affect the kingdom, bringing a drop in temperatures and more showers, mostly in the northern and central regions. Winds will be southwesterly moderate to brisk. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a relatively cold night and fair day tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and slightly choppy seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility due to fog, dust and flash floods in low-lying areas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty holds talks in Manama with the King of Bahrain on bilateral ties and the latest in the region, ahead of taking part in the first International Conference of Donors for Syria, which convenes in Kuwait tomorrow. The Prime Minister submits the resignation of his government, but is asked by His Majesty to carry on with constitutional duties in a caretaker capacity, pending the formation of a new government. And at least 65 people are found dead with shots in their heads in a district in the Syrian city of Aleppo, as fighting between rebels and government forces continues in different parts of the country. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.